Hello YouTube, it's Snowflarky, and today I'm here with my White Aura deck profile. I'm always been a big fan of Yu-Gi-Oh's water monsters, the cool kind of sea behemoths that they make in this game, and the White Aura Synchro series of cards is no exception. They're really cool, unique synchro monsters that require you to be playing specific water type deck to make the full use of them, and they were pretty easy to obtain, so I thought it was a fun thing to have. While White Aura has never been good on any competitive level, it still makes a fun deck to pick up and play with friends and show off these cool, recurring water behemoths. So, I decided to put something together, make it work, and with that, let's get into the card by card. Starting off with our monsters, I am playing 3 copies of Megalo Smasher X. Now, there's of course a number of different synchro styles you could be using to get out White Aura, but I decided to use something that I already have access to, which is a normal monster Tenyi package. So I'll explain more of that as we go. But starting off with Megalo Smasher X, it's a water 4-star monster. The 4 stars is pretty important because the way we synchro climb in this deck is we make a 6, and then we make the level 10 White Aura Bihamut. Megalo, the benefit of being a water is that some of the White Aura cards, like White Aura Dolphin, have an effect that when they are destroyed, you can banish a water monster to re-special summon them as a tuner. So we want to make sure any slot where we can fit normal monsters we can, and Megalo Smasher of X, of course, has 2000 attack, which is the highest for a 4-star water monster, and is the water monster. Next up, I'm playing 3 copies of Guard Dragon Justicia. This is our main tuner in the deck. Again, another water monster, which is important, and a normal monster dragon tuner. 2 stars, so the 2 and the Megalo Smasher X can make a level 6, and as well as a lot of the other level 4 cards in here make a level 6. What's nice about this being a normal monster is that we can pull it out of the deck with unexpected die, and of course it has synergy with normal monster and Tenyi support, which we make full use of in this deck. Next, I am playing 3 copies of Tenyi Spirit Chatana. So a cool thing about a lot of the Tenyis is that they are also level 4, and it's pretty easy to freely special summon them from the hand, which is pretty dope if you have either no effect monsters or only your normal monsters on the field at the time, which is nice. Chatana is of course the best Tenyi for normal monsters because it allows your normal monster to, when it's destroyed, you can banish Chatana from your hand or graveyard, resummon it, and then destroy a monster, which is quite nice. And of course, Chatana is also a water, so in this case, we can use it for the effect of White Aura Dolphin and banish it from the grave. Continuing right along, we're playing 2 copies of Tenyi Spirit Mapura, another 4-star Tenyi monster, which means Justicar and Mapura can go into our level 6 synchro, and Mapura just has a different Tenyi effect where when your non-effect monster is targeted by a card effect, you can banish this card from your hand or graveyard to negate the activation and destroy that card. So a little protection there, and outside of our normal monsters, there is some normal non-effect synergy in this deck from the White Aura Bihamut token, so these Tenyi cards certainly come in handy for all that. Next up, I'm playing 2 copies of Tenyi Spirit Nahada. This is the last of the 4-star Tenyis, which are the ones that we'll definitely be using to go into our synchros. Nahada's Tenyi effect is when your non-effect monster battles, you can banish this card from your hand or graveyard to lower the opponent's monster's attack by 1500. So nice little battle trick, definitely makes it pretty useful, and the 4 stars are great for our synchro climb. Next up, some extra Tenyi stuff to help support. I'm playing the 1 copy of Vishuddha. Vishuddha is a 7-star Tenyi monster. Like all the other Tenyi monsters, if you control no effect monsters, which means you either have no monsters or only non-effect monsters on your field, you can special summon this card from your hand, and then while you control a non-effect monster, you can banish this card from your hand or graveyard to target a card on the field and return it to the hand. Just a nice little non-destruction removal tool. Very powerful card in normal Tenyi, but playing less copies of it in this build, just because without the 4 stars, it can't really help us too much into going into Bihamut, uh, which is the namesake of this deck. And last, I'm playing 2 copies of Tenyi Spirit Nahada. This is a one of our Tenyis that we can freely summon to go into Monk of Tenyi, and then Monk of Tenyi, of course, keeps us a non-effect monster on the field to pop off more of the Tenyi effects, which is nice. But then Tenyi Spirit Adhara also has a nice effect that when you have a non-effect monster, you could banish this card from your hand or graveyard to grab one of your other Tenyi cards. Tenyi monsters and put it back in your hand. So this is nice for recycling a lot of our 4-stars like Nahada, Chatana, Mapura. We can even recycle Vishuddha if we want to use it again. So I am playing 2 copies of it because that is a pretty useful effect. And that is it for our monsters. Next, we're going into our spell cards. I am playing 3 copies of Unexpected Die. Unexpected Die is an awesome card that we definitely want to see in our opener. If you control no monsters, special summon a level 4 or lower normal monster from your deck. Usually, you use this to grab Justicia if it's not in your hand. And if it is in your hand, you can choose to grab Megalo Smasher X instead. If you see this card in your opener, you do have a good chance of being able to go all the way into Bihamut turn 1. So it is a crucial card, and for that reason we are playing it at 3 copies. Next up, I am playing 3 copies of Pot of Extravagance. Now this is quite a peculiar choice for this deck because when you're playing an extra deck base deck and you want to summon a specific extra deck monster, Extravagance does give us a risk of banishing cards, but I figure that risk is kind of worth it with the way I've built this deck. I just max out on the copies of Synchros I want. Most likely one will remain before I banish them all. And in exchange, I get, an extra card. It's Pot of Greed. And so for that reason, I think Pot of Extravagance is solid. You don't have to play Extravagance and build your extra deck like that. You could play a more traditional version of Tenyi and, give more of your extra deck space to other things, but the choice is yours. Next up, I'm playing 3 copies of Flawless Perfection of the Tenyi. This field spell is so awesome. It's so good. I love this card. Basically, all non-effect monsters on the field are unaffected by monster effects, which is pretty sweet. Monster effects, as we know, are pretty powerful, so having your non-effect monsters on the field be unaffected is pretty great, and that will also apply to the token White Aura Bihamut will summon, which is another reason I decided to go with Tenyi, is because of all the token non-effect synergy. And probably even the better effect of this card is that once per turn, when your opponent special summons an effect monster while you control a non-effect monster, you draw 2 cards. And man, drawing cards is great. Don't need any explanation. It's a pretty good field spell for this deck. And to make sure we get to it, of course, I am playing 1 copy of Terraforming. Just searches the field spell out of the deck. And that's it for the spell cards. Next up, let's look at some trap cards I'm playing in this deck, and I am playing quite a few because, this deck doesn't have a great turn 1 combo that essentially stops our opponent from playing, so I supplement it in a slower paced environment where trap cards can be more utilized. As always with trap cards in decks, be switching your lineup based to what you're playing up against, but I'm starting off with 3 copies of Storming Mirror Force. Storming Mirror Force is the big, high-risk, high-reward card because, given that it's a battle trap, it can get popped beforehand or set up a negate beforehand, but if an opponent walks into an unsuspecting Storming Mirror Force and all their monsters are bounced back to their hand, that's non-destruction, non-targeting removal. It can be super punishing. I am considering, and probably will be testing soon, Triple Torrential Tribute in this deck with Fury of the Karyushin, because the fact that a lot of monsters are water means that we can use Fury of the Karyushin to protect them. And that would be pretty cool, turning that into a one-sided board wipe. So definitely something I'm going to give it a shot at here soon. Next up, I'm playing 3 Waterfall of the Dragon Souls. Now this card is really nice, and one of the reasons that I've decided that I can play trap card Tenyi variants in certain versions. Sometimes when you can't go into your big monster, you're okay with sitting on a monster, a couple trap cards to buy you a turn, And Waterfall of the Dragon Souls can discard a bunch of Tenyi stuff from your hand, which is still usable in the grave if you have a non-effect monster on the field, and draw you a bunch of cards. So to explain, Waterfall of the Dragon Souls, it has two effects. You can either add a worm-type monster from your deck to your hand, which is pretty nice. You can grab any Tenyi that you want, pretty sweet. Or it has an effect that you can send any number of worm-type monsters from your hand and slash or face up from your field to the graveyard to draw cards equal to the amount plus 1. So that's why if you have a bunch of Tenyis sitting in your hand, you can throw them all in the graveyard where you can still use their effects if you're, say, sitting on a Megalo Smasher X, or just have a non-effect monster somewhere on the field, and draw a bunch of cards, which means you'll probably be able to definitely make your Bihamut play on your follow-up turn. So Waterfall of Dragon Souls is a cool card, very awesome. Glad to have it. Next up, I'm playing 2 copies of Heavy Stormduster. Heavy Stormduster is, a card for destroying spell and trap cards. You can target up to 2 and destroy them in exchange for your battle phase. And if you play against a good amount of other players who are playing back row, it can be a pretty good card because it can gain you card advantage. And, I'm up against some back row trap card based decks a lot, things like Tunes and whatnot. So Heavy Stormduster is a good thing to have on hand. Next up, I'm playing 2 copies of Back to the Front. I like Back to the Front because it's a chainable trap card, so if they're popping back row, I can just chain it. And Back to the Front can get me any of my needed materials to finish my White Aura Bihamut climb. But also, if I've already climbed into Bihamut and it has been removed, you can easily summon Bihamut back with Back to the Front. And what's nice about that is because of Bihamut's effect that you can special summon a token during your opponent's turn. You can get yourself your token, and then you can have another loop of White Aura Bihamut continually living, which is awesome. And so for that reason, Back to the Front definitely taking up some slots for right now. You could play a copy of Monster Reborn if you want to be more proactive on your turn with it. Next up, I'm playing 2 copies of Lost Wind, another trap card that I like because it's chainable, negates effects, and has a way to recur itself if it gets wiped off the field with Harpy's Feathers Duster. So you target a face-up special summon monster on the field, and you negate its effects and also half its original attack. Then, while this card's in your graveyard, if your opponent special summons a monster from their extra deck, you can set this card again, but banish it when it leaves the field. So that's pretty cool. Lost Wind is a pretty, underrated card in this regard. You could play some Solemn Judgments and whatnot in this case, and oftentimes maybe I'll switch it out. But Lost Wind is something I find myself putting in this deck enough that I think it's worth talking about in the profile. And last, I'm playing 2 copies of Fist of the Unrivaled Tenyi. This is basically an Omni-Negate trap card as long as you're controlling a non-effect monster. So you can negate a spell, trap, or monster effect activation, which is pretty cool. Also has the effect that when this card is destroyed by your opponent's card effect and sent to the graveyard, you can summon a non-effect monster from your extra deck, which is pretty cool. And for that reason, I definitely like having some slots in it. It's nice to have an Omni-Negate as long as you're sitting on a non-effect like Megalo Smasher or your Monk of Tenyi, something like that. And what's really nice is your White Aura Bihamut token, of course, is a non-effect monster, so it makes this card live. And that's it for next. Let's talk about the extra here. The extra deck, of course, is made with Pot of Extravagance in mind, so I am maxing out on 3 copies of relevant cards. Going into it, we're going to start off with the namesake boss, White Aura Bihamut. White Aura Bihamut is awesome. It's a 10-star synchro. It requires a tuner synchro monster and a non-tuner monster at least to make it. Part of why you have to climb is because you need the tuner synchro, which is pretty, takes a little bit of deck dedication. But either way, during your turn, when this card is synchro summoned, you can special summon a Divine Dragon token, which is a fish water type monster, level 10, 3,300 attack, 3,000 defense, which is the stats of White Aura Bihamut. So you're getting 2 3,300 attack monsters with 300 defense, 10 stars, which is sweet in defense position. And then once per opponent's turn, while you control no tokens, quick effect, you can special summon a Divine Dragon token. So you could use your token for other extra deck plays, and then on your opponent's turn, give yourself another one, which is pretty sweet. And of course, just the presence of 3,300 attack on 2 monsters can be pretty threatening if your opponent doesn't deal with it. And your token supports well with your Tenyi stuff. It gives you draws off of Flawless Perfection. It gives you the ability to use fists, and that is awesome. But then, of course, the thing about the token is when this card is destroyed by an opponent's card effect and sent to the graveyard, while you control a Divine Dragon token, you can special summon this card from your graveyard in defense position. So you can even set up a little loop with White Aura Bihamut, which can continue going. It makes it really hard to take care of with single target removal. Now the big problem, of course, is board wipes, because if you get, Raigeki'd and both your token and Bihamut are gone, well, you're going to have to use back to the front, or you're going to have to just save your perfection negate for something like that. But yeah, pretty sweet, awesome card. I like the theme of it. It's got a cool little protection, but it's not strong enough that it has ever made this card a meta-relevant threat. But it's very fun to summon this and just keep looping it and whop your opponent with lots of attack power. Something I'm a big fan of, so very cool. Next up, I'm playing 3 copies of Coral Dragon. This is the main water tuner that I want to go into. Coral Dragon is a 6-star tuner synchro monster, so when you have Justicia and either your 4-star Tenyi or Megalo Smasher, Coral Dragon is an option for you to go into. It's a tuner right out the bat, which a synchro tuner is something we need for the Bihamut. So as soon as Coral Dragon hits the field, once you get another level 4 on the field, you can make your Bihamut, which is pretty sweet. Once per turn, you can discard a card, target a card your opponent controls, and destroy it. So there is a little removal effect, and the discard isn't that punishing because you can discard an excess Tenyi that you don't need, and now you can't summon once you have an effect monster, and its effect is still useful in the graveyard. And in exchange, you get to destroy a card, which is cool. But the main plus of Coral Dragon here is that if this synchro summon card is sent from the field to the graveyard, you can draw 1 card. So when you synchro it and another monster into Bihamut, you will draw an additional card. Pretty nice. Do note that if you played Extravagance this turn, it does interfere with that, but you don't play Extravagance every turn, so it's pretty useful. And for that reason, Coral Dragon is a good card to have 3 of. Next up, I'm playing 3 copies of White Aura Dolphin. This one is more just to match with the theme of the deck. It could be argued that another 6-star synchro tuner, something like Desert Locust, could be a little better because it's a little more proactive. But White Aura Dolphin is a 6-star fish, 2400 attack synchro monster. Once per turn, you can target a face-up monster your opponent controls. Its attack becomes half its original attack until the end of this turn, which is pretty cool. But one of the pluses of Dolphin here is that it's one of the White Aura monsters that if this card you control is destroyed by an opponent's card, battle, or card effect and sent to the graveyard, you can banish a water monster to special summon this card from the graveyard, and if you do, it becomes a tuner. So this is a nice card to go into if you can't go all the way into Bihamut and you want something that, has a bit of an annoying effect with being able to, half a monster's attack, and has some recursion that lets you wall off an opponent for a little bit, and even when it comes back, it's a tuner synchro, which means you can make Bihamut on a follow-up turn, is definitely pretty cool. And for that reason, I'm glad to play it over Locust. If you only wanted to commit to your board when you can go into Bihamut on your turn, you can play Desert Locust instead of this card. Next up, I'm playing 3 copies of Monk of the Tenyi. Monk of the Tenyi is nice here because something like Adhara or whatnot can just go into Monk of the Tenyi even before you really start climbing with your synchro board. And what's nice about that is if you're going to end on something like White Aura Dolphin, but can make a Monk of the Tenyi, then you can keep a non-effect monster on the field, which will make your Flawless Perfection and your Fists of the Unrivaled Tenyi live, and it's always important to keep Flawless Perfection of the Tenyi live when you can so that you can draw cards when your opponent special summons, and that will give you the ability to make follow-up plays. So it's just a link 1, 1000 attack, non-effect. It requires a non-link Tenyi monster, so any of your Tenyi monsters can make Monk of the Tenyi. And last, I'm playing 2 copies of Gaia Saber, the Lightning Shadow, and 1 copy of Berserker of the Tenyi. Gaia Saber, the Shadow here, is a Link 3 with 2600 tech, non-effect monster, so it's just in there that if I have 3 materials and I want to make a non-effect monster to keep all my Tenyi stuff live, well, Gaia Saber is a good choice. I like more Gaia Saber over Berserker, which does the same thing except with 3000 attack, because Gaia Saber is less restrictive. It only takes 2+ monsters, whereas Berserker of the Tenyi does require 2+ monsters, including a Link monster. So I need to have Monk of the Tenyi ready to go, and it is possible that I could banish all 3 Monk of the Tenyi off of Extravagance. But it still happens that it's worth playing 1. This is the part of the extra deck you don't go into too often. Its probably biggest payoff is this is your targets you would pull out if your face down Fist of the Unrivaled Tenyi is destroyed and you're going to special summon a non-effect monster from your extra deck. And that's it for our extra deck. So folks, that is it for my White Aura deck profile. It's a very fun deck, very cool to get White Aura on the field and then just continually use it to hammer down your opponent while you recycle and loop it. It makes it a lot of fun for a pick up and play casual deck. It's a shame White Aura isn't strong enough to become competitive, but who knows, maybe someday they'll make just even better water synchro support and it will be more of an option. But for now, I'm still enjoying it. Let me know what you think. Are you a big fan of the White Aura? Kind of a bigger question is, what would be your favorite build around specific synchro? Which is, you know, just a synchro that's not generic enough that you can throw in any synchro deck. You have to commit some strategy to it. I like this one a lot. I like Underground Arachnid, Dino Wrestler, Giga Spino Savate is pretty cool. Things like that. Just let me know. I appreciate you checking out. I'll catch you all in the next one.